How you doing, Ben?
I'm good, dude.
Good.
Yeah.
Eddie, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
All right.
Awesome.
You guys ready?
Already.
Ready whenever.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
You do a jingle for me every time now, and it's like a different style, so
I
it
know.
throws me off. What's up, everybody?
And we also have Eddie.
I like that jingle.
That was
It's
good.
a pretty good jingle. Kind of matched,
Yeah.
a little rhyme with the B.
Yeah, good. Hey, listen, first things first. Thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one it is that you choose to use. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play Music, Apple Podcast, and whatever other ones are out there that we don't know about. And YouTube. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube. Thank you for watching the videos and sharing them with whomever you think could benefit. And in the end, we're trying to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
Correct. Affirmative. Tom.
Affirmative. What's up, Eddie?
Hanging. Awesome. Glad to be here. Really stoked that you guys asked me to come out. And, we're just going to wing it today.
We're going to wing it.
Yeah.
First question is, what are those toothpicks you got there?
Oh, dude. Cinnamon toothpicks, tea therapy, tea tree therapy, mouth sensations. Because I didn't want to talk about how I smoke cigarettes. I'm trying to quit. So let's just talk about the truth today. Maybe that's what we start off with.
Let's talk the truth.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, I met you once. Ben has
Yep.
never met you before. And,
Yeah.
we like to have people come on that obviously have a story and think that they have a message that can resonate with people. And obviously, I heard some of your story a couple months back when you were here. And I knew right then it made sense for you to come on the podcast. So give us a little bit of information about yourself and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Eddie. I'm an alcoholic. And I wanted to share that first and foremost, a person in long-term recovery. So, as we talk today, I attend a fellowship, but I'm not here as a representation of that fellowship or anything like that. But I got sober on July 9th, 2009. And, I live in Boca Raton, Florida now. I got the opportunity to meet Ben today. I got the opportunity to meet you a couple weeks ago. And I grew up right outside of Bucks County, or right outside of Philadelphia in Bucks County, PA. Good family, mom and dad are great. Probably talk about my dad a little bit today. Just the relationship that I've had with him. And I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And, all my siblings are great individuals. Like, man, I can't stress that enough. I have a brother that's also in recovery, which is super cool. He lives down here in South Florida as well, too. And I've been all over the country, but at one point in my life, I had never left like Philadelphia region, right? Maybe the furthest I ever went was like Sea Isle City, New Jersey for like the summer. And then since I've been sober, I got sober when I was 21 years old. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I've lived in California. And now I've been in Florida now for about 2.5 years.
That's awesome. So when you got sober, it was a lot of freedoms came with that, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
When did you move out of Philly?
2016.
And you got sober when?
2009.
So 7 years you were there. So and you knew drug addiction there, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, dude, I went to this public grade school. Always was like an athletic kid, right? Athletic, good student. I was the kid that a lot of families used to tell their kids, you should probably hang out with Eddie, right? Like, cause my family was like white picket fence, it looked like everything was great. And my parents raised me to live by these spiritual principles, right? And then I went to this Catholic high school, and by the time I was, a senior in high school, here I am. I'm captain of the wrestling team. I'm all city. I'm about to go to college to wrestle in college, getting scholarships at different parts of the country. And I can't stop drinking screwdrivers on the way to school. I can't stop eating Percocets on the way to school. I can't stop smoking weed on the way to school. I am vice president of my school, right? The student body. So
this is in high school.
This is in high school, right? And so like I was the one that always like put on the front, right? So I decided, you know, if anybody that's listening to this podcast like understands that, you know, I started to go cop in North Philadelphia, right? So North Philadelphia is about like, I don't know, 35 minutes from where I grew up, right? But I remember making a decision where I wanted to go to college because when you're on the way to like the cop man and like you're sick and you're withdrawing, you know that in like 10 minutes you're about to go get well. Like he finally answers the phone and you're about to go meet up with that individual and like a physical relief comes over and you're like, oh my God, I'm about to get well. I decided to go to Temple University all for the decision that I could wake up every morning with that sensation. Right. So like by the time I was 17 years old, like alcohol and drugs started making every decision in my life, even if I didn't know that they were making those decisions.
How were you introduced to it though? If you were, you know, brought, because a lot of times, you know, you hear, oh, kids, you know, they're surrounded by it with their families.
Yeah.
Parents are drug addicts or alcoholics. It's just something that they grew up seeing and, you know, they kind of develop the same patterns. What about for you?
So for me, playing sports, I played football, and so I got this birth defect in my lower back, right? Like you have, I forget what it's called, but as you get older, you have like 5 lumbar in your lower back, and as you get older, the bottom one fuses into your pelvis bone. I didn't think we'd have an anatomy course today, but fuses into your pelvis. Mine never did. So I'm playing football. I wake up one morning, and my whole right leg is numb. Right, sciatic pain. So it pinches my sciatic nerve. A couple weeks later, I break my wrist, and I break my wrist for the first time, and the doctor gives me Percocets, and it is like heaven, right? But prior to that, it was just like kids, right? Like at 12 years old, I'm sitting there in like 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and I get introduced to like smoking weed out of an apple, you know, peer pressure. So like all those little things, like we used to fill up our parents' Tupperware container with liquor and just hide it on a rock in the backyard, right? And like not every normal 12-year-old is sitting in their Little League uniform drinking Molson ice and smoking their mom's Merit Ultralights by themselves. So like it was peer pressure from like a kid's standpoint. You know, I heard the kids talking about it. You get introduced to drinking. And like that's all fun and games, but then all of a sudden you're like a sophomore in high school, you change schools because you think that if you change schools, like maybe you'll be a good kid, and then you get hurt, and then you get introduced to Percocets. But because I was raised in a good family, I always stayed one step behind and hung out with the kids that were worse than me. Right. And the reason why I did that was because if I was eating Percocets, I would hang out with the kids that was doing Oxycontin, because I would think to myself, well, I'm not an addict. They are. Right. And then when I started doing Oxycontin, I would hang out with the people that were doing heroin because I'm doing Oxycontin. They're the heroin addict. Right. So I just got into it because Percocets made everything feel better in my entire life.
It definitely resonates with me, and I've referenced a lot of times too because I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah,
I always hung around people that could drink just a little bit more than me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when I drink that much, Ben, then I got a problem. And then I reach that amount, and then I find somebody else. Next thing I know, I'm sitting at the bar with 75-year-old men that are dying from cirrhosis of the liver. Because I could say, well, I ain't that bad.
Yeah.
If I was that bad, I'd get some help.
Yeah.
But, well, that's, you know, it's interesting because growing up, a lot of times, you know, we see or we hear, especially working in this field, that, oh, a lot of your addiction problem stems from childhood trauma.
Yeah.
You know, those sorts of things. And I don't hear a lot of that. I hear peer pressure. it started off more as a societal thing.
Yeah.
You know, your friends were doing it, and you know, and you kind of followed in their footsteps per se, and then had the accident with breaking your wrist, and then got prescribed drugs.
Yeah, so a little bit though about it is like I'm kind of explaining it as when it was actually happening. Years later, when I got sober, July 9th, 2009, and then I started to do step work, I started to realize like things that occurred when I was younger, like the emptiness inside, the loneliness that I had, the lack of self-acceptance, the wanting to be better, the wanting to be number one popular kid but never being a part of, right? Feeling like I was lost in the sauce, the youngest of 4 kids, where I felt like my parents didn't love me as much as they loved my other siblings, like growing up in a household that I had fictitiously developed in my head, right? That was just like that inner gnawing, which like the big book actually talks about of Alcoholics Anonymous, like that malady of the spirit, right? Dude, that wasn't a part of my vocabulary when I was that age, right? But I found that all out after I got sober, right? So I had no like major trauma that occurred, except for these little things. And what I've learned in recovery is it's not about all the large things. It's about all the little things that like build up. Now, later on in my story, I developed my own trauma, right?
What do you got, Ben?
I rarely use this phrase, but like I relate to all this. I never really say that. Like I hate it when people say that for some reason. But talking about when I think about the peer pressure aspect, the funny thing for me is it wasn't actually peer pressure, as it was as much this imagined peer pressure like that I put on myself. For instance, I would hear like, oh, so-and-so did ecstasy last night. So I'd be like, oh, dude, everybody's doing ecstasy all the time. And I feel like left out.
Yeah.
So I'd be the kid, but I wouldn't just do it once. I would drop it in school and like push the limits, you know what I mean? Like, and then do it all the time like it was some normal thing. But yeah, that inner pressure that you feel to kind of fit in that, like, how do I, and just thinking everybody's one up on you.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's so common. And I want to touch on too, since you brought up the big book as well. There's something that you said about the Percocet where you said it was heaven, right? And you know, Tom talked about the trauma, like, and I always throw it out there. You know, I'll ask our clients all the time, like, why do you drink a drug? Oh, because of my trauma. The reality of the situation is that fuel on the fire? Absolutely. Does that keep us in it? Yeah, absolutely. And in past podcasts, I've talked about, like, I'll utilize my trauma as an excuse, for lack of a better way to put it. It's deeper than that. There's more clinical insight to it beyond what I just shared. But I would use it as an excuse to continue getting high.
Yeah.
Where you talking about that Percocet feeling like heaven, to me, I think phenomenon of craving.
Yeah.
That thing that differentiates us from other people, that physical part where I put this one substance in my body and it affects me differently than it affects other people.
Yeah.
You know, and the big book talks about that, where we use essentially, because we like the feeling, produced.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and then all the trauma on top of it, it just becomes one big pile of gasoline. The drugs light that up, dude, and it gets deep.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, about how like me and you suffer from that same allergy that the book talks about. But like somebody else, like Joe Schmo on the street, may try the same things that we've tried at one point, but the allergy doesn't affect them the way that it affects us. And we just had this conversation, 30 minutes ago?
Yeah, downstairs.
You know, downstairs.
Yep.
So before we got on that, you said that you wanted to talk a little bit about your dad.
Yeah.
So take us into, that, but I want to fast forward now to when the wheels really fell off.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And, you know, and then obviously whatever it was that you wanted to discuss about your dad, because then I want to focus on that too, because a lot of the listeners here are families and loved ones and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me say this really fast.
Yeah.
Based off of what he just said, too, keep in mind, if you're a family, because a lot of our listeners are family members.
Got it.
They contact us a lot of times in regards to their addict or alcoholic. grew up in a white picket fence.
Yeah.
Households. You heard it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't, the 3 C's that we talk about all the time, everybody talks about. Didn't cause it, can't control it, can't cure it.
Yeah.
Like, he did these Percocets and boom, off to the races.
For sure.
Like, you can provide your kid with everything. It's not your fault.
Yeah, exactly. Like, my parents are 41 years married still, and then I'll get into like when the wheels fell off. But like, my brother and I at one time were talking like a couple weeks ago, maybe like a couple months ago. And I was like, man, Dad seems really relaxed. And he was like, well, Eddie, like, he doesn't have to worry about me and you anymore. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, the wheels kind of fell off. Like, all the things I learned later on, right? Like, dude, I played football growing up. I wrestled growing up. I played baseball. Like, I was always in some type of organized sport. By the time I was a senior in high school, like, I'm no longer in that organized sport. And then I go to college, right? And the wheels just start falling off, right? I have nothing to like, so like my addiction and my alcohol, like I used to have in different areas of my life that I didn't even know about, right? So I'm in college and I'm living on my own and I have no skills to live on my own, even in a dorm room, right? And then living in a house. And I stopped going to classes. I'm getting high every day. I'm drinking every day. I'm copping drugs from the drug dealers, and the drug dealers are telling me that I should go to AA because I'm asking them to drink a Miller Lite at the same time. Like, when you have a drug dealer telling you that you should probably go to Alcoholics Anonymous, like, because you're also drinking, like, I was a garbage can, right? So by the time I'm a junior in college, I had been like kicked out of my house. My roommates had kicked me out of the house. I'm sleeping in Liberty One down in Philadelphia and growing up in this good home, right? Like, I was homeless for a little bit, but like, I wasn't the homeless where like I was couch surfing a lot. And I was just filled with shame and guilt that I would never call my parents to be like, can I come back home? Because the second I called my parents to come back home, they were like, yeah, come on, come back home. Right. But I'll never forget. It was, we were talking about college earlier too. It was Thanksgiving break. And if any of the listeners know that, like, if you've been to college, you know that after Thanksgiving break, like, you have like a week of classes and then you take finals. And then you're done for like the whole entire semester. So I had like formulated this plan in my head because at that point I was lying, I was stealing, I was cheating. And I didn't like doing those things. Like, I was stealing just to get high. I was working extra hours just to get high, just to drink, right? And then I started stealing from people. I started stealing from friends. I started stealing from family. I started stealing from strangers. I'm cheating in every area of my life. And like, honestly, I didn't like doing those things. So I was like, I need to drop out of college. Because if I drop out of college, I can work 120 hours a week and I can supply all my habits and I don't have to lie. I don't have to steal. I don't have to cheat, right? So my dad's like, it's Sunday night. He goes, hey, man, I'm going to drive you to school tomorrow. And I was like, you know what? I got a plan. I'm not going anymore. He's like, what do you mean you're not going? I said, I'm not going to school anymore. He's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, you told me when I graduated high school that if I went to college, you would like support me, you know, a little bit financially here and there. But if I didn't go to school, I had to get a full-time job. And I could live at your house for a time being and pay rent. So here's the deal, Pops. I'm going to pay you $125 a month, and I'm going to sell speakers. He's like, where are you selling speakers, man? Like Best Buy, Circuit City? And I was like, no. I need a ride to the warehouse tomorrow morning, and I'm the guy that drives around the parking lot of Best Buy and Circuit City. So I dropped out of college to sell.
That's where I know you're from.
Yes, that's where it's at. I dropped out of college to sell speakers out of the back of a van. And I had convinced my dad, or at least I like to tell myself that I convinced my dad to drive me to my first day. I was like, oh my God, I got one over on him. He's driving me to the office, first day of the office. Reality is like I was his little baby boy and he like knew that I was killing myself every day. He literally watched me walk out of the house and die a little bit more every day that like he had no idea what to do. So he just went along with it. So, like, I drop out of college to sell speakers out of the back of the van. I start living in my parents' house, and then, like, I'm in and out, right? My parents' house. I start bartending. I had been working in restaurants like for years then. I start bartending and things got really bad. And why I wanted to talk about my dad and the way the wheels come off is like my mom had like, I tried detoxing at the house. Like the gig was up, right? Like, but they didn't know what to do with me, right? Like my grandfather passed away when I was in 3rd grade. He was an alcoholic. So like my mom had experience with like Alcoholics Anonymous and like my grandfather drinking. But I was like the token, like they looked at me as like the drug addict. They were like, well, what do we do with this? Right. So like they like locked me in my room at one point, and I watched like the first 3 seasons of Grey's Anatomy on a 19-inch tube TV as I tried detoxing in my bedroom, you know. But I remember one day, it was about 6 months before I got sober, I dropped down to my knees and asked my dad for help. And I said, Dad, I need help. Like, I'm sick. And he stepped over me, or at least it felt like he stepped over me, and he said, go for a run. You'll feel better. But I didn't hear him say that. What I heard him say was, I don't love you anymore. You're not my son anymore. I'm ashamed of you. You're never going to make it. Like, just get out of my life. My dad didn't say any of those words that day. He literally just said, go for a run. You'll feel better. But like, just shunned me out. Right. So he like allowed me to live in his house, but like wouldn't talk to me. I would like go about my life. I'd be gone by the time he came home from work. So like at that point in my life, it was like on a mission to like end it, right? Like I'm going to just drink and I'm going to drug until I no longer can. And then something sparked me. And actually I wasn't thinking about this until recently. I was working at a gas station, and I had left bartending because I thought if I stopped working at the bar and I just worked at the gas station, like maybe I won't get high anymore, right? Like now the gas station was right next to the bar, but like if I didn't work at the bar, I'd work at the gas station. Like the mindset that we have, right?
That we have, because I literally did the same thing. I went from bartending to I'm going to go work at this barbecue place and just wait tables because all they have is beer and wine.
Yeah.
And that's going to get me sober.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I get it.
You know, I'd like moved down the Jersey Shore. My parents had a house there. And at that point, I'd moved down the shore and I thought to myself, like, I actually detoxed myself with Suboxone and things were good, man. Honestly, for like, I don't know, 20 days.
I thought he was going to say like a year. 20 days.
No, like 20 days, but like I was, you know, I was drinking, but like I wasn't doing drugs anymore. And fast forward, I had actually went back a little bit. I had moved down the shore before my dad had said that to me. But fast forward, June 20th, 2009 was Father's Day. And I walked into my parents' house on Father's Day to my mom and my sister sitting in I grew up in a split level house. So I would like walk into the family room. They're sitting in the kitchen. They're like, where were you? And I was like, oh, Justin just dropped me off. They were like, well, that's funny because Justin just left. So like you weren't with Justin. And they said the gig's up. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, you need to go to treatment. And I remember just like, I like sighed a relief, man. And I remember like taking a deep sigh, and I didn't put up a fight. I didn't do nothing. I was just like, okay, I'll go. So I like called the lady on the phone. My mom literally handed me a manila folder and like, you know, I work in treatment, you work in treatment. This was before like the open exchange. I had no insurance. You know, I had like Medicaid through Pennsylvania County. Like I ended up getting like scholarship through this county fund called Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. But I like called the number in the manila folder, and this lady, Laura, answered the phone. I'll never forget. Right. And she sold me a bill of goods. Right. Like an admissions coordinator does. But she made me feel comfortable. And like, I will always remember her name. I will remember like her making me feel like I wanted to go get help, right? So I hang up the phone and I said, look, they have a bed, Mom, let's go. Or she says, let's go. And I was like, whoa, hold up. Like, because I had $80 in my pocket. I had $80, a track phone with no minutes on it, and a black book that had everybody's cell phone numbers in it. That was like all I owned. I didn't have a car, so like when I got sober, I had no car, I had no phone, I had no money. I wasn't one of the kids that like lost all this stuff. Like I had nothing to lose, period, except $80. And I wanted to go get high one more time. And my mom took the $80 out of my pocket, and she said, we're going to go to Kmart, and I'm going to buy you a carton of cigarettes, and I'm going to buy you a pack of underwear. Get in the car. And that's exactly what we did.
Kmart,
right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Just dated yourself, dude.
I know I did. Yeah, so we went to Kmart. I get this like pack of underwear, and like I fall asleep. I'm like a little sick. I'd like taken a sub before I went to detox because like I just want to get high one last time. And I go to this treatment center in like Malvern, Pennsylvania, out in the middle of nowhere. And I get there, and I remember the first group that I had. It was at 8 o'clock. I go through the whole entire intake. It's 8 o'clock group. It's like the reflection group. And they're like, new guy, how are you? And I'm like the first one they say, like, hey, we got a new guy here. You know, there's like 90 people in this like cafeteria. They're like, how was your day? And I'm like, terrible. I have no clue what I'm doing here. Right. And right away, 2 people come up to me, and 19 days later, I woke up from a blackout out of that treatment center. And I got high, and I drank for 19 days in a treatment center.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Elaborate
Clarify
on
that?
Yeah. So, like, when I say that I woke up from a blackout, was I blacked out for 19 straight days? No. But, like, when I came to on July 9th, 2009, I had gotten really drunk the night before, right? On July 8th. And I was eating Xanax in the treatment center, and I was drinking. We were like sneaking out. And like by any means, what I do want to, I don't want, that treatment center saved my life, right? So like I do on this podcast want to say that this is by no means saying anything negative or having a negative connotation towards that treatment center. They did everything they could. I am an addict. I am an alcoholic. If I want to get it and I want to not stop, I am going to figure out a way. I went to every group. I wasn't the one that was like, I was loaded. Like, why wouldn't I go to group? You know what I'm saying? Like,
fair enough.
You know, maybe they could have done a little bit better job, like catching on when I was loaded, you know, but it's not like I was drinking in the middle of the daytime and smelling like Pabst Blue Ribbon walking into group. You know what I mean? Like I might have like cheeked a Suboxone here and there and like went in feeling a little nice into group, that type of stuff. But yeah, I was eating a bunch of Xanax, and on July 9th, 2009, I woke up, and the 2 people that were supplying everything discharged. And like, I am a big believer that God puts people in my life when I need them the most, and he removes them out of my life when I need them the most. And on July 9th, 2009, God saw fit that I was incapable of doing this on my own and said, I need to remove these people from your life so that you can see the other good people that are trying to help you at this treatment center. And that's exactly what God did for me. Right. And, but mind you, I also wanted to go home to my mom and dad's house. So I did not tell anybody in that facility that like my real sobriety date was July 9th, 2009. I rode with,
Then you would have started over.
and mom and dad wouldn't have let me come back home. Right? Like, as a 21-year-old kid, I was trying to weasel my way back into like not having to go to sober living, not having to do this, not having to do that. So I rode with that. My sobriety date was June 20th, 2009 for a long time. Yeah. So we can get into that part, you know, next. But like, I lied about my sobriety date for 2.5 years.
Wow. Why?
And it was only a 21-day difference or 19-day difference?
Yeah, 19-day difference.
What was your logic behind that?
So, I get sober on July 9th, 2009. Mom and dad, like, I can't tell them that, like, if they ask me, like, what's your sobriety date? I'd just been lying. So, like, when you lie, you have to stick to that lie, right? Or, like, you just have to roll with it. And the longer you continue to lie about something and you stick with it, then it starts to manifest in you're living every other area of your life is truthful except for that one lie. But you have now convinced yourself that you have to hold on to that one little lie, because if you tell somebody that you've been lying about that one little thing for such a long time, they're not going to believe anything else that you've done in your entire life, right? So I remember like leaving, and my mom and dad let me come back home, so I couldn't tell them like, hey, I only have 11 days. Like they would have been like, what? So I like rode with it. I lied to my parents. So then I started going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings and AA meetings, and I started going to meetings, and I'm like, well, if I tell these people, they're going to tell my parents. Like, dude, I had nothing on me. I had gotten locked up a bunch of times, but like I never got locked up for a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had nothing that was like holding me back. I remember having like 90 days at one point, and I was at a meeting in Southampton, PA, and this kid starts sharing about how he lied about his sobriety date. And it was like a 30-day difference. And I was like, loser. Like, like I rode with it, man. And, Ben, we were talking about this. Like, you didn't date anybody for like, what, 2 years or something in your early sobriety? Like, I was 13 steps when I came into the rooms. And if people don't know what that is, like, it's when somebody with multiple years of sobriety gets with somebody that's brand new in recovery. Now, at that point in my life, you couldn't tell me that I was 13 stepped because I was a guy. That doesn't happen to guys. But like later on, I realized like I had no spiritual growth for like 2 years. I really wasn't doing step work. I had done step 1, step 2, step 3. And in the flat book, which they're all flat, but that's what they call it in NA, the step working guide, the last question of the 4th step is there anything that you've been lying about since you've gotten clean that you don't want to share with anybody? And just like every other good recovering alcoholic or addict, I had read every question in that flat book and saw that that was the question in the 4th step. And I was like, I'd started to buy into recovery at that point. By the time I had like 90 days, 6 months, like I bought in that like it was working, right? Mm-hmm. Like I woke up every day and like by default, my life had gotten better without any spiritual growth. So like I bought into this process that like, this stuff works. So then I also bought into the process that like I can't lie about things anymore, but I can omit them. And I also had read the basic text in the literature that actually said that like you need to do a thorough and honest 4th step. So I took that to the next level, and I was like, well, if I don't actually do the 4th step, it's not like I wouldn't have done it thoroughly. So like, then I don't have to tell anybody about this lie.
I see the logic.
Yeah. Like, dude, I had started to live a better way of life, right? And I would go to meetings, and I was sharing at meetings with like a year, 2 years. I was like picking up medallions on June 20th, 2009. And then finally, when the pain gets great enough, you want to grow. Right?
Yeah.
Like you want to live a better way of life. And something sparked, and we'll talk about my mom too. Something sparked where my mom and I got in a fight when I had like 2 years sober. And she said to me at one point, it's like you never stopped.
Oh.
Right? Like that hit you pretty hard, dude.
That's a thing.
It's like you never stopped. And she was right. All I had done was not use drugs and alcohol, right? I had done other good things, and I don't want to like take away from like not doing other good things, but like I hadn't grown as an individual. And like become the man that like my parents wanted me to become, right? And when she said that to me, I started writing on my 4-step. And I wrote on my 4-step and I finished the 4-step, but I still, and like I had told my sponsor everything. Like all those dirty secrets, like they all knew about those.
It's cool you're talking about the 4th and 5th step because we just did a podcast on 4 and 5, like going pretty deep into detail.
Yeah, so like
it's a good follow-up.
You know, I wrote on it and I had already told my sponsor like all my secrets except for that one. Because it wasn't about telling my sponsor the secret. I had no problem telling him the secret. I just knew that he was going to tell me that I had to tell everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those are like the key things. And I'll never forget I got done writing and I sat on it for like, I don't know, a month, 2 months, and I was like, I don't want to tell him I'm done it. I don't want to do a 5th. And I can vividly remember this. I was living in Northeast Philadelphia. It's like a decent day out. I pulled into my apartment and I had this garage in the back. I get out of the car. I go to open up the garage door and I don't have a clicker. Like, you know, it's a regular key for the garage door. And the key just breaks in the garage door. And I like lose it. I'm all by myself, like screaming at this garage door, kicking the garage door, like, fuck this, F this, da 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 da. And my phone rings, and it's my sponsor. I'm like, what? What do you want? And he's like, well, good to talk to you, too. And he's like, it sounds like you're having a great day. So my sponsor used to always say, a good day is when everything goes right and you don't get high or drunk. And a great day is when everything goes wrong and you don't get high or drunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he goes, sounds like you're having a great day. I'm like, yeah, man. I was like, you know, he's like, well, what's wrong? And I was like, dude, I hate work right now. The girl I'm seeing, she's terrible. My real sobriety date's July 9th, you know, and I hate my parents and this and that. And he's like, wait. What did you just say? And I was like, yeah, I'm done my 4-step. I'm ready to do a 5th. And he's like, wait, your sobriety date is what? And I was like, July 9th. He's like, of this year? And I was like, no, of 2009. He's like, why did you been telling me it's June 20th? I was like, I was getting high in treatment. He's like, all right, let's do your 5th step, man. And that's how I like, dude, again, God saw fit that like it all just came out. Cause like left to my own devices, I would have kept that as a secret and I would have bottled it up. I had to like call my employer.
I want to point something out real quick because I just finished doing group prior to Eddie coming up here, and I was literally talking about this. Tom, you know how I always say we don't want you to get straight A's in treatment.
Yeah.
I tell the clients, like, I hope you get pissed off at some point here.
For sure.
Because that's when the truth starts to come out. Mm-hmm. That's when we have an opportunity to use all the tools that you've been given. Like, if you're just coasting through treatment, like... You're kind of missing the point. Like, you're not being challenged. So,
yeah, for sure.
So, like, I'm looking at them like, I hope you get pissed at some point. Like,
yeah.
You know, they're looking at you kind of funny. But right there, dude, you're pissed at a garage door. Yeah. And that's what it took for the truth to come out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like, out of anger, let me tell the truth.
The littlest things, man. Yeah. And, like, we... Like, and then I'm doing a 5th step and I'm realizing, like, I have these, like, resentments and things that happen in my life that, like, there was, like, 3 or 4 things that really didn't happen in my life. Like, I just, like, manifested these resentments that, like, later on when I started doing step work and doing amends, they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, that didn't happen. They were like, no. I was like, oh, okay.
Did we talk about that, going over the 4th and 5th step? Like, where it says fancied or real? I don't know that we brought that. I'm glad you're bringing this up because, you know, I thought we were pretty thorough. But point is like, when it comes to resentments, whether you made it up in your head or not, it's still real to you.
Yeah,
it's still 100%. Real to me. Like, even if I fancied it in my imagination, I still feel it.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't matter. Then you find out, you know, doing the 4-step, you're like, shit, this didn't actually happen. Yeah.
Those mental blank spots. We have quite a few of those.
Exactly.
Man, there was a lot there.
Yeah, my bad. I'll just keep talking for a while.
No,
so.
it's all good. So when did you move out of Philly?
All right, so I moved out of Philly 2016.
So 6 years, I think we established after you
like
got
7
sober.
years. Yeah, 7 years after I got sober.
What was it like growing up in Philly, knowing the drug scene there,
Mm-hmm.
knowing where to cop drugs, that whole lifestyle, and then having 7 years of sobriety there?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? Was it hard for you for a period of time? And then I guess I asked that because I made a geographical change. I never got sober in Pittsburgh. I would have probably, hindsight being 2020, could have I? Yeah, knowing what I know now, I could have. But man, it would have been hard.
For sure.
And then maintaining that sobriety. So I've never had to experience that. When I moved to Florida for treatment, I didn't know I was moving here, but I've never used a mood or mind altering substance in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know it.
Yep.
I don't know it here. What was that like?
It was difficult. There was a lot of things like it's actually, I just talked to him recently through Facebook Messenger, but like I had a friend, I'm not going to say his name. And his life is pretty good right now, but like I used to get high with him all the time. And, like I had to make those phone calls knowing that like they lived 15 minutes from me, saying like, I can't see you. Right.
You can't see them because you were clean.
Yeah.
If you see them,
Like I'm going to get high.
got it.
Yeah. The other thing too, though, is as difficult as it was actually a miracle because like I went home to the same bed that I used to get high in, same bed that I woke up, would have to get high in. And I would go home in recovery and I would wake up clean and sober. It's wild, right? Now, I also did like 9 months of intensive outpatient treatment after rehab. So like I ended up I was still in treatment, but I was going to meetings and I was doing like a 90 and 90.
Treatment. So you were doing intensive outpatient without housing. You were living with your
I was
parents.
living
So like a
living at my
real
parents.
IOP, so to speak.
Yeah, like a freestanding IOP.
Yeah.
Actually, God rest his soul, my uncle was a therapist at a program, so I got scholarshiped to that IOP. But like just the same way as like you get sober when you have consequences that show up in your life, right? They instituted a consequence for me with my scholarship, right? They basically said, we'll scholarship you for this IOP, but if you leave against clinical advice for the scholarship, then you will owe back the cost of every session that you've done.
Mm.
And they kept me there.
That's not a bad.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's a
We should start doing that.
yeah, it's a great idea because it kept me there. And like, to be honest, in the first 30 days of IOP, I'm going 3 times a week, you get the 12 sessions in or whatever. Like I'd learned a good amount. It wasn't about that. It was about fulfilling a commitment for like another 7-8 months where I didn't want to finish that commitment. And somebody else made me finish that commitment. So after I graduated from that IOP, like the most, the best thing that happened was like Eddie finally finished something that he started, right? Because it had been a long time since that. But going back, I digress, but going back to, is it difficult? Yes, it was extremely difficult because I had cravings. I could call whenever I wanted to. But like they say, the bigger the base, the higher the higher the point of freedom, and build your foundation. And I cannot accredit God in my life for the people that he put into my life. Like there was just things that were undeniable that would show up in my life. Like at one point I remember I had less than 6 months And I had been hanging out with a group of guys, going to meetings, and the one guy goes, "Hey, we're gonna go pick up my buddy Vinny." And like we go to pick up Vinny, and he gets in the car, and I'm like, "Dude, it's my coke dealer."
Oh,
jeez.
And he's got 13 months sober.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So like, boom. Whoa. Well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. Right.
Yeah.
Like I had that instance. I had another guy that, in my life that he was like my first phone call, and like he had a home group, and like I called him because he actually got sober down here in Florida and had moved back home. And I knew he was back home. So I called him and I was like, "Dude, are you still doing that? The whole recovery thing?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can I go to a meeting with you?" Like link up with him. I got linked up with a girl, right? And I went through a lot of emotional torture at that time in my life, but she had like 3 years at the time. And I had convinced myself that like if I used, she probably wouldn't see me anymore. So like I would stay clean and sober out of spite. I would, whatever it is. So it was difficult for me staying at home, but I'm prideful, right? Which is why I shared the earlier part of like, I had no growth in the first 3 years of my recovery,
Yeah.
like spiritually, but I stayed clean. I stayed sober, in spite of myself.
Prior to us recording, you mentioned something about there was a point where you were struggling. You had long-term sobriety. You went to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So
Like, what was going on that you were, like, struggling at the time or whatever?
yeah. So Tom, you were asking like when I left, Philadelphia and Bucks County and moved to DC. So
And how much time did you have at that point?
like 7 years.
Okay.
So to lead up to it, I had gotten Clean in One fellowship, and right before I moved to DC, I started to not really hang out in fellowship as much. I started to develop a resentment against that fellowship. Again, my own self-resentment, nothing that the fellowship did
happens
to
all
me,
the time.
right?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm not going to go to these meetings, right? So I started going to these meetings in North Philadelphia a lot, because I was sick of going to like the social meetings, if you would, because nobody wanted to talk about like recovery. Everybody wanted to talk about work. And at that point I was working in treatment, and I had been working in treatment for a long time. And in Philadelphia area, treatment started to become much bigger, right? A lot of treatment centers were opening up in that area. So I would like go to meetings and people would be asking me about work all the time. So I was like, I'm not going to go to these meetings. I'm going to go to these like hood meetings, where like I'm the only suburban white kid in the meeting.
Yeah.
So then I end up getting this job opportunity to move to DC. So I shared that part because then I go to move to DC, and I tried to do the same thing. I would go to meetings in like Southeast DC with like super good recovery. But the reality is that's like not what I needed when I moved to DC. Like, not anything against those individuals, but like a lot of them were like old men that had like grandchildren. Like they weren't hanging out with me on like a Thursday, Friday night.
Yeah.
And I'm new to a city. Like I'm a new person to the area. And I stopped going to meetings. When I moved to DC, I had like the best job in the world. I was doing really well. I was a top rep in the company. Had this nice new apartment in Alexandria, Virginia, and I stopped going to meetings. And I hadn't been to a meeting for like 6 months. And I'm lonely and I'm broken. I'm working in treatment. So that was like one of the reasons why I didn't use, because I was like, if I use, like, I might lose my job, right? Like, that's what I held on to. But I didn't want to use because I was thinking to myself, like, dude, I'm not going to use. I'm not going to throw away this time, because I don't care what anybody says. Like, time isn't everything. Like I said earlier, like I had 3 years and had no spiritual growth. But I slowly started to work the steps backwards in like that 6 month period of time, maybe even a year period of time. So like,
break that down for people that might not know what that means. Working the steps backwards.
Right. So like the 12 steps, like in that period of time where I stopped going to meetings, I stopped going to meetings. I stopped sharing with the newcomer. I stopped sponsoring people, obviously. You know, that's the 12th step. The 11th step, you know, I stopped deepening a relationship with a higher power. The 10th step, I mean, I was doing a daily inventory, but I would like sign off on it, and it was Eddie's daily inventory. I was like, I'm the man.
You do like I do. Leave off the second half, promptly admit when you're wrong. Yeah. I'll take inventory, but I won't admit it to anybody.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm doing great. Yeah. You know, 9th step, you know, there is no amends to be made because like I'm still living in those old behaviors, and then they're really not old behaviors anymore because I did them earlier that day. You know, so the 8th step, the amends list is just continuing to grow, even though I don't know that it's continuing to grow.
Yeah.
I'm acting out on my shortcomings and my character defects. You know, there's no such thing as like sharing a searching and fearless moral inventory because like I am living it in that moment, right? I'm acting out on my own will. You know, I'm not turning my will over to God. I am living in complete insanity. And I get to the first step, and the only thing that I didn't do was I didn't pick up. So for about a year, I lived in a purgatory, which is worse than the hell that I lived in when I was using, because I had experienced the promises. I had experienced this, like this world beyond my wildest dreams, like the things, the peace, the quiet, the love, the compassion, the sympathy, the empathy. I had experienced those things. So this purgatory that I lived in, when I would go out and I was a rep in sales, and I would go out and I would put on this smile and I would say hi to everybody, and everybody looked like happy-go-lucky Eddie, the same way as when I grew up when I was using as the white picket fence, except now I'm sober, except I'm just dry. And I would go home every night to my apartment, in my one-bedroom apartment, and I would be a miserable individual, and I didn't want to go to meetings because I had also like done some things in that area I had dated 2 girls, so like that made it very easy for me to like step away, not at the same time, but whatever, you know. And I remember I was sitting there and living in the insanity of my life with no solution. I'm not using, I'm not drinking, and I had 2 thoughts in my head. And the first thought was I wanted to kill myself, and the next thought was maybe I should be with somebody and then I won't be lonely. And they were like simultaneous thoughts, right? And then I went back to like, I'm going to end it. If you had seen me earlier that day, you would have had no idea that I had that thought. Like, I'm wearing a shirt, everybody, that says, "You good, bro?" Hashtag mental health matters, right? And May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And my boss at the time was a big member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had been going to this other fellowship, and he's a big member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he knew. He was like, "You're not doing well. Like, you might have everybody else fooled, but like internally, I can tell. Like, you think that your boss or like you think that your coworkers like don't know you. They do, right? Like they know you, whether you're good friends with them or not. You spend a majority of your life with these people. They pick up on your vibes. They pick up on your energy." And he said, "Dude, will you do me a favor?" He's like, I know you haven't been going to meetings. He's like, "You should go to an AA meeting." I was like, "I'm not going to an AA meeting. I'm good. I'm fine." Meanwhile, I'm sitting at home, like, contemplating suicide. Yep. And he says, "Dude, do me a favor. Come over to my house on Saturday." I was like, "I'm not coming to your house. This is not work related. I'm not going to your house." He's like, "Just come over to my house, please." He's like, "I got a sponsee coming over." He goes, "We're going to do this thing called Stickman." So, you know, I'm sure the podcast gets thrown out there. Stickman was originated in Texas. I'm not going to say by who, because there's some controversy as to who originated Stickman in the state of Texas. So I'll let the listeners figure that out. There's 2 guys, they do this thing called Stickman. There's a program out in Texas that actually builds up Stickman, and it's a workshop, and it pretty much is just like 1, 2, 3, 4. And like you go over the spiritual obsession, the disease of alcoholism, you go over the physical obsession, and you go over the mental obsession, the disease of alcoholism. However, prior to that, they break down the history of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. So Matt L. in Washington, D.C. breaks down the history of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. I had been working in addiction treatment for about 5 or 6 years at the time. I could tell you the whole history of Narcotics Anonymous, right? But I had never been told this story of when Bill and Bob first met.
Yep.
And I had never been told the story of the phone call that he had made when he was in the phone booth and he was going through the phone book. And I had never been told how Bob didn't want to meet Bill, and finally he gave in and was like, fine, you're not really going to help me, but like, I'll meet with you, man. And Bill was like, yeah, I don't really, for lack of better terms, like, I don't really care about you right now. Like, I just know that when I tell you my stuff, I'll be okay. Right.
Yep.
And something hit me that day, and like it like rejuvenated my spirit. And I went to an AA meeting that night. And dude, I started to go through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got a sponsor in AA, and life was tough for the next year and a half, man. You know, I was like doing step work, but I was like a newcomer at like 8 years, right? Like trying to make new friends. I remember one guy in my home group said to me like, hey man, like, he came up to me afterwards, and because I shared about how like, hey, I need some friends. And a couple months later, he was like, hey man, we're only going to call you so many times before we stop calling you. Like, cause like I was going to meetings sharing like I want friends, and people were calling me. I'd be like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
So like it was a struggle, right? Once again, God plays a role in my life, man. And about a year in, there's a convention, and my friend was like running the convention in DC. And she tells me, Eddie, you need to come to the convention. The main speaker has a very similar story to you. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't want to talk to this guy. Like, I don't want to listen to his story. Like, Liz, don't worry about me. So I do as I'm told, though, and I go to the convention, and I go to the meeting, and my sponsor is speaking, and he's my sponsor now. And he starts sharing his story, and he starts sharing about how like he's worked the steps backwards. He has no God in his life at 10 years. He contemplated suicide, and like it hit home so hard to me that I got up halfway through the meeting and left. Didn't even listen to the rest of his story. Right. I was just like, dude, no, like you said it earlier. Like I rarely say this, but like I relate to everything. So I like leave after the meeting. I end up getting his phone number. And I was like, hey, man, I did leave halfway through, but like, what's your phone number? So for about a month, I didn't call him. And then I started reaching out to him. Like, I would text him once a month, once every couple weeks. I would call him. And that was a year prior to me ever knowing that I was going to move to California. And this dude lived in California. So I get introduced to this guy a year prior to being offered a job out in California, who has the exact same experience as me, the whole nine. And I believe God put Pat in my life a year prior to me going to California, because he saw what I did when I moved from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. And he was like, dude, I'm going to put everything right in front of you. So I move out to California, and I'm like, Pat, will you sponsor me? So Pat sponsors me. And the first thing we do is we open up to page 52, and he just goes, you've been living in untreated alcoholism for about 10 years. And I know you said that you know, we were doing like a fourth and fifth step here, but like it wasn't until I really dove into We Agnostics and started to dive into the second step of Alcoholics Anonymous, where like my life over the last 4.5 years has been better than it was for the 32 prior, right? And I learned things, the relationship with my dad, right?
So if you want emphasis on that, go back to the pod. We did 1 through 5. Go back to the step 2 one.
Gotta do this,
we touched on some agnostics stuff too. Yeah,
you know, it's funny, Pat. I just called Pat on the way here, and like I actually haven't talked to him in like 2 or 3 weeks, and I called him like a week ago, played phone tag, and like we have a relationship, and he is my sponsor, but it's my responsibility to reach out to my sponsor. Like we're very close. I have to stay on top of it a little bit more, right? And if you're new in this, like, call your sponsor every day, right? But we have a good relationship, and the relationship that I have with him helps me with the relationship with my dad, right? And I share about that because, like, so Pat's my sponsor. I do have 13 and a half years. I don't talk to him every day. My dad, however, is my first phone call. So the guy who I had thought stepped over me and, like, told me that he didn't love me anymore or care for me and was shamed and guilt, like, dude, he's the first person I want to call if I have something to talk about, right? That didn't happen until I had 10 years. There's
a pattern that's been brought up in this podcast that I literally think we may have never talked about. And what are we on? Episode 270?
277?
Yeah. Are we that far?
Yeah.
All right. 277.
That's rad.
Dude. All right. So you were talking about earlier, like 5-10 minutes ago, about being in meetings, catching a resentment of the meetings because they weren't carrying the message of recovery. Dude, I don't think we've ever talked about this. I've experienced this too, man, where I've gotten in this spot in my recovery. Because, like, dude, I know the big book pretty well.
Yeah.
You know the traditions. Like, I think I know something about recovery. Every time I think I know that, I find out there's a lot more to learn. But I found myself at one point in my recovery going into meetings, and I'm like, they're not doing this meeting right. They're not sticking to the big book. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. It's supposed to be like this. Like, and I started critiquing everything about these meetings I was at, and kind of along the same thing, dude. And it was actually one of my sponsees that checked me. And and this is the cool thing about sponsorship. Like, yeah, I end up sponsoring a guy who put together several years, and he looks at, and I'm just having small talk with him because it was after business meeting. He's like, Ben, what changed? The meeting or you? And I was like, dang. But, like, ooh. Yeah, man. So, but come to find out, like, I'm like, all right, I'll show up to the next one, continue going to the stupid home group that I hate now. And after a few meetings, dude, I came to the realization, like, this guy's right.
Yeah.
Like, I have no control over what anybody in that meeting says or does, other than, like, in the business meeting, throwing my hand up and, making a motion for whatever. But, dude, at the end of the day, like, I ended up seeing, like, if I just show up, what's going to happen is going to happen, and then I can play my part to carry the message. And, and dude, and I had this idea in my head, because I also belong to, I've talked about this before, I belong to a bunch of, like, AA, big book groups on Facebook. Yeah. Because I see this pattern a lot, too. Like, old-timers, for instance, people with a decade or more, they get in these comment sections of these recovery groups that are supposed to be inspirational, and all they do is tear down meetings and how they're not doing it right and how they're not following traditions, this, that, the other. Like, I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because, man, that guys go back out. We keep referencing back to Brave, a guy we know, Brave, had 9 years, goes back out. Like, this happens, man.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And a couple things that you're saying actually just come to mind. Like, I got lucky when I first got clean and sober. Like, I got connected. My first sponsor was, like, caring, loving, sympathy. But I also got matched with, like, the history of Narcotics Anonymous is very big in Philadelphia. Like, a lot of the guys that, like, wrote some of the literature are actually from the Cape Atlantic region in New Jersey, right? Like, so I met a lot of guys that had time, wrote, like, it's how it works and why, told me to sit down and shut up, right? But then I also had the ones that, like, gave me a hug and, like, said, welcome back, stuff like that. But one of them, Dutch H in NA one time was sharing at a convention, and he was talking about how the old timers used to write all this stuff or say all the things like, oh man, we're being too soft on people, da 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 da. And he goes, what's the one thing that we learn in recovery that's constant? is we're taught to change. So like as we grow, like there's going to be change in a new home group, like, and we have to adapt to that change. But like if we take control of it, that's the problem. We have to be a part, the unity, right? So I could go off on that for a while, but like what I've learned is like it's always when Eddie gets in the way of everything, right? Like it was my resentments that I had. Nobody did any of this stuff, dude. I'm the one who walked myself out of the rooms, right? God brought me to the rooms. I'm the one who walked myself out of them and then came back, right? Because God brought me back. It's like that. You ever hear that? You ever hear that story? It's in meetings all the time about the guy who's stranded in the middle of the ocean. So there's like a guy stranded in the middle of the ocean and he's on a raft, right? And you ever hear this, Tom?
No.
So he's stranded in the middle of the ocean on a raft and, you know, he's praying to God and he's like, God, like save me, right? And, you know, this submarine pops up. It's like, hey, man, you need help? And he's like, no, I'm good. God's got me, right? He's like, all right, cool. Submarine just like takes off, you know? And then all of a sudden this like big boat comes and was like, hey man, do you need help down there? And he's like, no, don't worry. God's got me. Boat's like, all right, cool, man. Like, see you later. And then like a helicopter sees him and like brings a rope down and was like, hey, do you need help, man? He's like, no, dude, I've been praying. God's got me. So like the guy drowns in the ocean, you know, and he gets to meet God. And he's like, I have this resentment against you. Like, I prayed for help, like, and you weren't there. And he was like, bro, I sent you a submarine. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. Like, I'm not just going to show up, like, into action. Like, I am going to put these things, the plan that I have outlined for you has always been there. I just need you to take those steps, right? Yep. It's like, man, dude. I don't know if I just went off topic there.
That was out of
that was good.
That story's in Drop the Rock.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
my home group in DC, yeah, it's not AA literature. My home group in DC was called Drop the Rock. We did 6 and 7 step material. We read The Ripple Effect, Drop the Rock, and we would read out of the 12 and 12. It was all started from a resentment of the beginners meeting that was at 7 o'clock. Yeah, so like,
Well, listen,
sorry.
for the sake of time, and we could go on for a lot longer, but it's, you know, how long do you think we've been recording now?
I don't know. It feels like
Hour and a half.
Almost an hour and 15.
wow.
Yeah, that's cool.
See, that's what's cool about it. Dude, I feel like we're just sitting here talking about like 12-step stuff.
This is you're talking Ben's love language right now.
Whether we were recording or not, I'd be sitting here talking about this.
Yeah.
Like,
But I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do now.
Okay.
Obviously who you work for and, you know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I'm an open book, and, you know, people know that what I do want to share real quick is Simon Sinek is like the new age Dale Carnegie. And he actually says people don't buy what you sell, they buy why you sell it, right? So like whatever you do for a living out there, the listeners, like, just have a passion behind what you do. So like I work in behavioral health care. I work in mental health treatment now. I've worked in addiction treatment. I've worked in co-occurring treatment. I work in primary mental health treatment. I work for a company called Harmony Hills Behavioral Health. I'm the VP of partnership at Harmony Hills Behavioral Health. We're a 49-bed primary mental health residential treatment center. So yes, do we treat secondary substance use? We sure do, but we treat a lot of thought disorder, mood disorder, so schizophrenia, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, trauma disorder. We're located up in Altoona, Florida, which is about like 45 miles north of Orlando, and it's 49 beds. We sit on a 67-acre campus, and I wanted to share about how I worked more so in the addiction, because like I started working in addiction treatment because I got an opportunity. I was sober. I went to school and got certifications. I said how I dropped out of school. I went back to school. I got certifications. I got associates, the whole nine. But then and Tom and I had talked about this before, is just the same way as why I started working in addiction treatment. I really wanted to work in mental health treatment because there was a situation that had occurred in my life, not with me, except for what I just shared. It wasn't that experience about the one to do what I wanted to do. It was somebody very close in my life suffered from a mental health disorder breakdown that I had, that spiraled into my family not really knowing what I did for a living, right? And didn't really reach out to me that much, but from that point forward, I really wanted to work in mental health treatment because this individual that I knew in my life had never had any substance use disorder issues, no mental health disorders, and had spiraled into a manic state. And I wanted to help that population and also help the education of families that mental health is real. Mental health is in 1 in 4 families affected by this, right? And I guess, I'll talk for another hour and 15 minutes. So that's what I do for Harvard.
Yeah,
Hills.
I mean,
Sorry.
and Eddie and I, we had a conversation about this the last time we met, and you're right. I mean, the mental health aspect of it oftentimes gets glanced over, and when you have somebody that's dual diagnosed, substance abuse and mental health, it's like, well, which one do you treat first, or which one do you treat primary? And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, in the end, though, they both need to be treated simultaneously.
For sure.
One's going to be, obviously probably, well, in any mental, like Rock here, we're primary substance abuse. We can dabble in mental health. If it's something that is, they're properly medicated and,
For sure.
They're pretty stable, some bipolars and stuff like that. But if somebody calls us and they're having active hallucinations, or, they're hearing voices and stuff like that, and they're using substances, we know well enough, okay, this person needs to go to Harmony Hills.
Yeah.
Because you guys are going to address the elephant in the room, per se.
Exactly.
I'm glad you called it elephant in the room, because one thing that I've seen several times is we'll get people who have previous substance abuse history.
Mm-hmm.
They've been to several treatment centers. They'll come to us for the first time. And then you're on the phone with the parents, and you have to disclose to them, has this person ever been to a primary mental health facility? Because somehow, a lot of times, a client will go through a ton of substance abuse facilities, primary substance abuse. There's always a secondary mental health. They kind of go hand in hand.
Yep.
But eventually you say to the parents, this is actually a primary mental health case. And it's kind of my perception that a lot of times parents, like you were saying, elephant in the room, they're like, no, it's the drugs doing this. If they can just stop doing the drugs, they'll be okay. When we find out, here at Rock, because there's been people that we've had to refer out, we're bringing them in off of the history that we get over the phone, past medical records, stuff along those lines. They get here and you got to tell the parents, hey, they're schizoaffective.
Yeah.
Have they ever been treated for? This is a true bipolar disorder. They get super manic, and they're it's just the weed. If they'll just stop the weed. But so oftentimes, and this is one of those cases where people with high mental health acuity, they are truly, truly self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And a lot of times, dude, in my opinion, they might not even really have an actual substance abuse addiction. It could be 100% mental health, and they're just using those drugs to medicate themselves. I mean, you don't know that for sure until they get actual primary mental health treatment. But Tom called it the elephant in the room, and we've had some of those cases, man, where you got to tell parents, and that's probably hard to hear.
Nobody ever wants to. It's the same as addiction, right? When you, a lot of times people want to sweep that stuff under the rug or be in denial that it even is there, you know. And I had somebody in my life too, very close to me, that, you know, severe mental health. And he, you know, now over the past couple years, or well, past year, he's doing very well. The best I've ever seen him.
Really?
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just hadn't heard much lately.
Yeah, no, he's doing great. But it's a testament to, I've seen him at his worst, and now I've seen him, you know, at his greatest. And, you know, it's got to be treated. You know, and it's got to be treated in a proper way. And, you know, facilities like yours are extremely important. So, you know.
It's crazy, though, how you actually just said about the families that want to say substance use, because when I got sober 13, 14 years ago, it was the opposite. Like, most families would be like, no, he's just depressed. Let's go to a therapist.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And now we've come to this point where certain families are like, no, it's not mental health. He's just doing some fentanyl, you know? But yeah.
It's crazy. Well, hey, man, listen, I that was great. I think it was awesome. And, you know, if we can do round 2 whenever. Did you drive down here just for this?
So I live in Boca.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I live in Boca because so I have a team of outreach. I handle the admissions, the outreach that stretch across the entire state. You know, so I do the outreach with the partnerships and stuff. Andrea, Melinda, and Bonnie, they're our operations, our clinical director, our executive director. Like, they're the meat and potatoes of like the magic that we do at Harmony Hills, right? Like, my outreach team, obviously, we get out there, we let everybody know about what we do, but it's like Bonnie and Melinda that at our team is just like, it's so cool to like see over the last year and a half that I've went over there, because it used to be a substance use facility.
Yeah.
Harmony Hills used to be a substance use facility, and we brought in, you know, new clinicians, new executive staff to like really treat the mental health. And that was one of the things when I spoke to the owner about going over there. I said, are we going to really do this? He goes, yeah. And I was like, okay, you know, and man, I can't speak highly enough of Andrea, Bonnie, and Melinda. You know,
will they be up there next week?
Yeah, they'll be up there next week. You'll get to see them. Maybe not Andrea, because Andrea's got a couple things going on, but Bonnie, our clinical director, and Melinda, our executive director, are going to be there.
Awesome. Cool. All right, Ben, any final thoughts?
No, I could go for another hour and a half too. Cut me off, dude.
Yeah.
All right.
Eddie, appreciate you coming on. Listen,
No, thank you.
If you guys want to reach out, or if you want to get in touch with Eddie, if you have somebody in your life that's struggling with mental health, you can obviously send Ben or I an email, tom@realrecoverytalk.com, ben@realrecoverytalk.com. You let us know, hey, I heard Eddie's podcast and I got a aunt, uncle, brother, sister, sibling, whatever that is struggling with mental health, and we'll link you guys up, and hopefully Eddie can get you some help.
Yeah. Either way. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. All right, that's it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, I just said this, but I'll say it again, Ben. If you want to reach out to us, you can always email us, tom@realrecoverytalk.com and ben@realrecoverytalk.com. And in the end, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.